Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-4966. How cute. Look at this chubby little seal pillow. It's so gray and round and huggable. Is it even a seal? Looking at it, it's like a gray tube lump plushie with a little neutral face and 4 limbs popping out the bottom. Honestly, you could project all sorts of different personalities and animals onto this thing and they would fit quite well. It's a fun little friend for anyone. Plus, it's actually quite animate. This little stuffing-filled friend makes a variety of cat-like noises and loves to socialize. In fact, if you leave it alone for too long, it'll start getting anxious and withdrawn. When it's hanging out with other organisms though, it likes to emulate their behaviors and actions to the best of its abilities. So even though it doesn't need to eat, drink, or breathe, it'll do its best to pretend that it's doing these things while around other creatures with biological requirements. This behavior is all cute and fun for a while, but SCP-4966 has a dark side hidden behind the adorable visage. If a corpse is left in the vicinity of it for any extended period of time, it will open its mouth exceptionally wide to consume said corpse. If the body is bigger than 4966, it'll still be able to subsume it entirely and will more or less take on the shape of what it's eating. This causes 4966 to become misshapen and unsightly, at least for a little while. Eventually, it will digest the corpse and return to normal. During the time that it's digesting the corpse, its plush body will take on different traits of whatever is inside of it. Oftentimes, this means generating additional limbs or taking on shapes that resemble what it's eating. After about 4 hours, it'll regurgitate a lovely mass of almost unrecognizable material that's biologically consistent with the original body. Yuck. If it eats a person, it often gains access to vague versions of their memories. This proves particularly interesting when the Chaos Insurgency staged an assault on the facility where 4966 was being kept, and the Foundation fed the dead members' bodies to the plushie to see what they could figure out. However, 4966 often speaks like an insufferable child and only really attempts to recollect when bribed with food, so you can imagine how this whole thing went down. I'm just glad we don't have a mutant plush eating dead bodies out in public, especially if the thing takes on properties of said dead bodies. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-5787. Staying on the topic of food and consumption, this anomaly occurs in a wicked cheesesteak joint out in Philly. Geno's, I think it's called. Like most legendary local restaurants, there's a very specific culture associated with the place. Orders have weird names, and the folks running the place don't take kindly to folks who don't want to use their lingo. However, messing up your order at SCP-5787 isn't just gonna earn you a couple dirty looks and maybe a head shake or two. It could mean you ceasing to exist altogether. Let me explain. If you want to order a cheesesteak with cheese whiz and onions, you could ask for a whiz wit. If you wanted a cheesesteak with cheese whiz and no onions, you'd say whiz without. Kinda weird at first, but not super hard to figure out. You better get it fast though, because if you go to Geno's 3 times and mess up your order each time, you're dematerializing. Poof, just like that. Sorry dude, should have been more careful while ordering your regional delicacy. For a while, nobody knew where the poor saps who goofed up threefold ended up, but the Foundation, being a very persnickety and answer-oriented organization, sent somebody to find out. As it turns out, the unfortunate Wit-Wit-Out Welchers end up in a gorgeous room, speaking with an entity resembling the Quaker Oats guy. He explains that the Wit-Wit-Out system is so gloriously simple that goofing it up actually puts the universe a little out of whack. The offending individual is then brought to meet the great Wit-Wit-Out, an amorphous Lovecraftian mass of cheese whiz, beef, and onions. This blob of regional cuisine will then demand to be eaten to restore balance to the universe. If the person does so, they will rematerialize across the street from Geno's, vomit, and then return to the sandwich shop to order a cheesesteak correctly. What a world we live in. I just don't think that the world at large, especially in the Uber Eats era, would be able to handle such a strict set of rules, let alone deal with the consequences of failing to follow them. Not everyone is as mentally strong as a cheesesteak fan from Philly. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-5062. What a weird and creepy room. Although it does enact some positive change in the world, so it can't be all that bad. Known as the Cleansing Room, this is a space for positive change and self-mutilation. It's a balance. 5062 is a room in the Echo Hotel in Moscow and went unnoticed for years. However, one day a young girl who was staying there realized there was something wrong with it. A pair of scissors appeared before her and she realized that the only way out of the room was to cut the tip of her fingernail. She did so, left the room, and told her parents about the materializing scissors and the compulsion to remove a part of herself with them. The Foundation was alerted, and since then they've been studying the room. Apparently anyone who finds themselves inside will be presented with a pair of scissors, usually of differing sizes depending on what they need to chop off. Person must then go through with a body part removal, and then they'll be allowed to leave. And usually after this, they'll go on to be a more generous and socially minded individual. The severity of the self-inflicted injury seems to be correlated with the lifestyle of the affected individual, where people who have committed antisocial acts must remove more of themselves. It seems that folks who did terrible things before being cleansed go on to do really positive things afterwards. Like a petty fraudster lost his tongue and then went on to donate plenty of money to victims of fraud. A D-class took off his finger and then became a better team player, ending up working an office job instead of doing crimes. Weirdest of all, a serial killer ended up cutting off his own head, but still somehow managed to run for public office and pass a bunch of laws helping the homeless. His headlessness wasn't noticed by his constituents. So maybe this one isn't all that bad, but I don't know how I feel about folks going in just to chop off pieces of themselves. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-1006. Hey kids, you want to do some spider communism? Come on, it'll be fun! That's exactly what you're getting with SCP-1006, an enormous colony of Marxist spiders who live in the woods and work for each other. It's actually quite impressive, the feats they're able to pull off. These arachnids are able to distribute propaganda via web writing and tend to draw the faces of passers-by to get their attention. They even knock down trees and block paths to keep folks in the general area so they can do their best to communicate with them. In fact, when given paper and ink, the spiders are able to communicate quite clearly, handing over manifestos that critique Western imperialism, the bourgeoisie, and also ask for less mosquito spraying in the area. They've amassed quite a large amount of food for themselves too, with a crazy amount of dead animals and insects being found in the area. And while folks may have differing opinions on communism as a whole, this version isn't really meant to benefit humans. We're the oppressors in this case, and the spiders would like nothing better than to dismantle our society and take back the world that is rightfully theirs. Which doesn't sound so good from our perspective. Radical ideas are pretty spooky when you benefit from the status quo, eh? And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-754. Watch your step, especially if you've got some tattoos. Hell, keep an eye out for any strange movements in the foliage. SCP-754 is a plant superficially similar to morning glory or field bindweed. This one grows extra fast though and can take over objects in very short periods of time. Its rapid proliferation has proven to be quite difficult to deal with, and if left unchecked, these vines will cause more problems than they're worth. They can overgrow entire areas and tangle up people, sometimes resulting in death. But that's not all. They can also grow in non-traditional ways, like onto paper as drawings, or along walls as graffiti, or on people's skin as tattoos. They can be stopped via incineration, but that's about it. So if you're not careful, folks could find themselves strangled by super fast vines, or even physically restricted by images of vines appearing on their skin. The Foundation has tried to prevent the growth as much as possible, but 754 is always looking for new places to extend its tendrils. Coming in number 5, we've got SCP-5142. At first, you might laugh at the idea of this SCP. It's pretty goofy and contains references to a song we all know and love. Just about every person who hears it will find themselves singing along at some point, whether it pops up in a meme or if they see a can of assorted diced fruit at the supermarket. A whole lot of fun for the whole family. Well, that is until you realize the scope of the anomaly we're talking about today. We're all familiar with the song Fruit Salad by the Wiggles, right? Perfect. Well, if you've heard this song before, you've been under its mimetic effects. It's just so catchy, right? Like almost too catchy? It almost makes you crave some fruit salad after listening. Well, if you've ever found yourself with a hankering for some mixed fruits after listening, you're not alone. Apparently the bit where the Wiggles sing fruit salad has mimetic properties and makes people crave fruit salad. At first, it's just a little craving, but with time, they will refuse to eat anything other than the medley. If they hear other nouns within a short period of time after listening to that phrase, these items will also be added to the list of desirable foods. It doesn't matter if these are edible or even remotely safe to consume, folks will try to eat them. The longer this goes on, the more intense the cravings become, to the point where the subjects will engage in dangerous and possibly self-harming behavior to acquire said items. Close to a month from the onset of this anomaly, the affected individuals will also start to turn a bluish color and gain incredible amounts of muscle. It's a wild thing to behold, to say the least. Now, this has some very upsetting consequences in the past, like parents potentially consuming their young children alongside a side of honey, or maybe actually eating cars and houses. Not great. However, this is easily remedied. I said that the phrase sung by the Wiggles, fruit salad, is a meme. Thankfully, the refrain, yummy yummy, is the anti-meme. So as long as you listen to a yummy yummy after a initial fruit salad, you'll be free from these effects. So just make sure you listen to it all the way through. Don't, you could become a rampaging ogre of a human, demanding to consume fruit salad, street signs, maybe even the president. Coming in number 4, we've got SCP-5172. This one messes with my brain a little bit. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to think anymore. All of my hotel experiences are now suspect. Did I encounter something like this? Oh boy. SCP-5172 is a strange phenomenon seemingly affecting guests at North American hotels. It gives them the impression that there is a machine there built for the sole purpose of making and dispensing ice. I always took it for granted that hotels had such devices, but according to this document, those aren't standard practice. There's a whole history to this, but we'll gloss over it in favor of the spooky story within. Check out the wiki entry if you want more anomalous ice machine history lessons. Now, anyone who uses one of these so-called ice machines at a hotel will activate what's known as a Zalmunna event. These events are very likely to cause injury or death. In fact, the Foundation discovered SCP-5172 when investigating a string of grisly murders in Winnipeg. Go Canada. So after hallucinating the use of an ice machine, the affected individual will start to feel as if they're being watched. This will develop into confusion and then exhaustion. The fatigue is so intense that they feel as if they can't do anything other than seek out their hotel bed and go to sleep. At this point, if they sleep anywhere other than a hotel bed, the event is cut short. Their lives will be spared. But if they make it to their cozy comfort-in mattress, game over. This is when SCP-5172-1 appears, usually by phasing through the door. 5172-1 is a humanoid entity with extra long arms and a long, needle-like thing extending from its head. It will sit on the victim's chest, inducing a sleep paralysis-like state where they're aware of what's happening, but unable to move or speak. It'll then stab them through the eye with the needle-like extension and begin to harvest material from the person's chest. Using tools from its chest cavity, 5172-1 will begin cutting and scooping 4-centimeter cubes from its victim with relative ease. Starting slowly and picking up speed over time, it usually spends a couple hours hollowing out its victim before getting up and exiting the way it came in. Holy smokes. These creatures have so far only been seen in North American hotels and can actually be stopped through force, but killing one doesn't prevent it from happening again in the future. So let's hope ice machines don't show up anywhere else. Oh, they have. There's one in Amsterdam now. Uh-oh. Coming at number 3, we've got SCP-2728. Anyone living out that terrifying 90s nightmare of a stable job day in, day out? It's weird to think that the cultural zeitgeist at the turn of the century centered on complaining about how stable and boring everything was. Look at us now. SCP-2728 is a strange manifestation of that kind of terror. Here, it's probably easier if I just explain how it works. There's a point in Barcelona where you can see a building that isn't actually there. Like, you stand on the street corner and look up, and then you can view an office building poking up from the skyline that can't be seen from any other angle. The Foundation studied it for a while and saw that it had regular business hours, shut down on Sundays, and was full of people that had real-world counterparts. Interesting. Don't get too close though. It seems that anyone who notices this building and gets up nice and close is brought into their bustling business, made to work their regular hours doing nothing for all eternity. The Foundation sent an agent to check it out, but they discovered that he had been replaced by a near-perfect body double. However, the original agent did his best to reach out via Morse code to let the Foundation know that his life had become hell. Apparently, the folks there function like insects, doing only their job and never anything else. And the city no longer has any outer limits. And from the building, the sky is endless and dark. Coming in number 2, we've got SCP-3966. This is an SCP with a much harder approach to sci-fi than many, with a lot of it being tied up in mathematics and physics. With that in mind, I will probably miss some of the best bits because of the way my brain works, but if you're a fan of hard sci-fi, this is definitely up your alley. 3966 is a neuroactive polypeptide found in human spinal fluid. Apparently it's been sequenced and nothing in it is even close to being human. No one really knows where it came from or what it's doing, but folks affected by it experience higher rates of hypnic jerk.
You know that feeling when you're about to fall asleep and then you think you're falling? Well, over time, the researchers concerned with this anomaly became infected themselves and started to feel the effects. They then discover that there are 2 variants of this stuff. Soon enough, it becomes clear that it is a cognitohazard and can spread through just the knowledge of it. And eventually, we learn that it could essentially be something from the 4th dimension, something that we can't fully conceptualize reaching out to us in some way. Just like how folks in a hypothetical flatland couldn't see us if we looked down on them from up above, whatever's behind 3966 has a whole new dimension to exist in, making it impossible for us to see all of it. But if it contacts us in our 3D land directly, we might experience just a bit of it. Coming in number 1, we've got SCP-5346. Careful though, this one might ruin one of your favorite movies. 5346 is a cognitohazardous phenomenon that manifests upon the viewing of a specific scene in Forrest Gump. The classic line about boxes of chocolates triggers some sort of conspiracy theory craziness deep in people's brains. Was the line "life is like a box of chocolates" or "life was like a box of chocolates"? You probably know the answer, but the people affected by this phenomenon, it'll drive them nuts. Some Mandela effect nonsense at its finest. Over time, the people watching this movie will start to feel as if the characters on screen are aware of their presence and are watching them. Glances at the camera, uncomfortable line deliveries, it's a whole rabbit hole to fall down. Apparently those who do fall too deep begin to actually experience some terrifying facsimile of Hanks's Gump in their real life. They will see him around their home, looking in through windows, strolling down hallways, and eventually, it'll get them. Users who posted about this on their favorite conspiracy chat rooms and image boards often end up dead, victims of blunt trauma to the head. And in one case, a note was recovered in their apartment that reads, "Mama always said stand up to snitches." So if you revisit Forrest Gump, maybe don't analyze it too deeply.
Coming in number 5, we've got SCP-4335. Damn, lockdown's gonna make this one terrifying again. Like, what did a whole bunch of folks, including myself, do during that extended period of time indoors? Well, what any sane person would do, get back into Minecraft big time. Is this relatable? I know me and my friends did this, but is it true for everyone else? Regardless, you can't deny the popularity and cultural impact of Mojang's block building simulator. Hell, this recent milk crate trend gives off Minecraft vibes at this point, but I digress. We're here to talk about SCPs, aren't we? And this one is a doozy and a half. SCP-4335 is a strange, unexplainable entity that resides within Minecraft. Folks who stumble across it tend to end up pretty freaked out, and for good reason. It looks like someone took a classic Minecraft skin and colored it all black. No face, no features, no garments, just the darkest of dark colors. For reasons beyond our understanding, it also has a cloud of black smoke particles around its form at all times. Sometimes you might catch a glimpse of yellow eyes or a white mouth, but it's not too often that this happens. Sprouting from its back, we've got a set of black tentacles, akin to those one might associate with Slender Man. It really does sound like something born from a mediocre Minecraft creepypasta, but it goes deeper than that. This form isn't just something that goes around griefing people and spooking them with hyper-realistic eyes and blood. This SCP has a goal and seems pretty good at achieving it. It will move from server to server, often private or single player ones, whenever it pleases. And if anyone goes into creative mode, it hops to a new server too. Somehow, this entity, born within the game, has learned that it is a creation of humans or humanity. It wants out so that it can live a life outside of these bounds. However, it has also decided that humans aren't worthwhile creatures and are motivated by unseemly things. Because of this, SCP-4335 wants to destroy humanity. It has a power that's hard to describe, as outside of a game world it doesn't really make all that much sense. It can create in a way that humans cannot, and it's striving to escape from the digital realm into our own. If and when that happens, things could get very hairy for us reality dwellers. Coming in number 4, we've got SCP-5764. When you navigate to this SCP's entry on the wiki, you'll be presented with only one prompt. Unlike most other pages from the Foundation's files, this one does not feature a classification or a set of containment procedures, just a little bit of text. In red, clickable text, you'll see the words, "Don't click." For those of you who don't want something very heavy weighing on your mind, I'd suggest you follow these instructions. You can stick around if you're curious as to how this one works, as only I have to really experience it to get the idea across. There aren't any cognitohazards or inherent dangers here, but when you click that first prompt, a whole new story opens up. Keep clicking and you'll be responsible for what happens. Alright, you ready to hear what goes on in this entry? If, as a defiant little rat, you click don't click, you'll be greeted by another clickable piece of text. This one says, "There is nothing here." But you can click it, and if you do that, you'll get another reading, "There is nothing here." Of course, folks are going to want to keep clicking at this point. If you do so, you get to more emphatically worded pleas not to click, then some threats concerning what might happen to you if you continue, but eventually whatever presence is behind this text relents. They begin talking to you through the information in the clickable text. Apparently they didn't exist until that page was opened, and they will continue existing until you reach the end of the entry. So the more you click and interact with SCP-5764, the closer this entity inches towards death. It's a real emotional roller coaster, with the thing starting out angry, then sad, and then happy that it has someone to communicate with before it goes. Apparently this has happened many times, and the entity knows it will happen again. But the more people that complete this ritual, the shorter its time is before being erased and restarted. At the very end, it bids you adieu, and then you're finally brought to the actual containment procedures. These state that the SCP is an anomaly that affects this page, and every time someone visits it, it gains sentience, and every time they leave the page, it loses it. It can't go anywhere, as the page seems to contain it, so yeah, it can never escape. Folks who read this are also encouraged not to visit the page again, for the sake of the entity. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-3426. We could very well be screwed by this hard to define SCP. It might have something to do with the pattern screamers, and if you're unsure as to what those are, maybe stay in the dark. Some knowledge is better left unlearned. Or you could watch our video featuring them, but that is up to you. SCP-3426 is a phenomenon responsible for the total extinction of a technologically and socially advanced planetary civilization. What exactly that means is still up in the air. It could be an event, an entity, a concept, or many other vague things. Nobody's really come up with a way to properly define it. However, we do know a lot of the characteristics required for the phenomena to begin. And now that I'm thinking about it, we're not in trouble. Earth is much too primitive a planet to be concerned with destruction like this. 3426 focuses on highly advanced civilizations, ones who have figured out an indefinitely sustainable energy source, perfected space travel, and developed a unified theory of the universe. We're a little bit off from that, eh? And interestingly enough, having an organization like the Foundation is also a prerequisite. If these and a few more criteria are met, it begins. Anomalous material corrosion, reality distortion, and corruption of information media spread across the planet, eventually wiping out all intelligent life. Many planets have already fallen to this phenomena, which we have discovered through some very clever usage of drones and probes. For now, we don't meet the advanced criteria, so we're safe. But it seems we're constantly moving towards a future where we might, so keep an eye out. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-6223, the good old fire and brimstone radio program, a staple of American horror literature for ages. What's scarier than driving through some backwoods area where all anyone ever listens to is a radio show that paints you as the devil? Better be careful where you stop to eat, right? Well, this radio show is a little more anomalous than your average brainwashing broadcast. It seems to find a way to communicate directly with the sinners it designates, and ensures that they have the worst possible time while trying to escape. Headed by DJ Slimy, SCP-6223 is a broadcast that plays in all sorts of backwater places. He fields calls from people looking to confess their sins, although he plays no part in absolving them. This holy broadcaster believes firmly that there is no heaven, that pop culture has sold people the idea of it to push out more products. Nope, hell is the only option for anyone, and finding a nice cozy place in the lake of fire is all that one can hope for. Then he ensures that any listeners are going to join him there by influencing all those around to rip and tear and maim anyone who passes through with a guilty conscience. And the more you listen, the more you hear yourself in the proceedings. It's designated safe, but the doctor investigating swears that one of the people heard on the broadcast sounds just like her. And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-6002. The world we live in is constantly changing, and we have a whole lot to do with that. Humans have probably had the largest impact on the planet Earth than any other living being since the dawn of time. We build, we destroy, we conquer. A lot of stuff gets swept under the rug as a result. Ever heard of an A-turn? Didn't think so. SCP-6002 is what we can only assume is the Tree of Life. From here, all life sprouts. Like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, this tree is the symbol of all that is living, and if it were to be destroyed, the rest of life would follow. It seems that the Foundation discovered such a tree in the early 20th century and decided that its traditional wards were not doing enough with it, so they assigned some doctors to it and began research. Bad call all around, as they soon discovered. Every branch of this tree represents a species of living creature, and sometimes even concepts of life and health. itself. If a branch representing an entire breed of dogs were to be broken off, that type of dog would die out entirely. This did end up happening, and the Foundation quickly erased the fact from the common consciousness. But it doesn't seem that they stopped there. An entire classification of living beings, Aterns, seems to be missing from everyone's memory. But if the entry on the wiki is to be believed, Aterns did once exist, and some meddling with SCP-6002 deleted them entirely. It could happen to any living species too. For now, it seems to be mostly under control, but some high-ranking Foundation scientists are dead set on continuing research. Any small mistake could have massive repercussions, so cross your fingers and hope that they don't accidentally phase out your favorite animal, or worse yet, every animal.